Hey everyone, welcome to Darkcast Interviews. I'm your host, Jonathan Miley. DCI is a long-form interview podcast where we talk to game creators about who they are and their work behind the scenes, as well as, obviously, their recent or upcoming video games. In this episode, I talk with Jussi Autio from Resistance Games about their upcoming game, Company of Crime. Company of Crime is a turn-based tactic game not too dissimilar from XCOM, but set in 1960s London as you rise to power in the criminal underground or attempt to take it down from the side of the police. For more information about the game, check out the links in the description below on YouTube or in the show notes for this episode on darkstation.com. There you can also find a written preview for this game, as well as the original Darkcast and other video game reviews, previews, and features. Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at darkstation_com, find us on Facebook, check us out on YouTube, and email us at podcast@darkstation.com. As always, thank you so much for listening. Now on with the show. Welcome back to Darkcast Interviews, everybody. I'm Jonathan Miley. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with... Yeah, I did not ask you how to pronounce your last name before we got started, and I should have done that, but I didn't. But I'm sitting down with Jussi, the director of Company of Crime, part of Resistance Games. But Jussi, how is your last name pronounced?
It's Autio, so Autio. Almost like audio, but with a T, so Autio.
Autio, okay, fantastic. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you for, we just got done doing a game demo, so I got to see a lot about the game, and so there'll be a written preview up with all of this, which will be really cool. But thank you for sitting down with me. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, and thank you for taking the time to see the game and doing this podcast. This
Absolutely.
Is great.
Absolutely. I love doing this. There's nothing more fun than talking to the people that are magic and make video games. My brain doesn't comprehend it, but I'm glad you guys do.
Yeah, that's well put. Well put. It's like some of these days when there is bugs to kill and so forth. I wouldn't always call it magic, but I'm happy you did. So
it's magic from my end, so it's all good.
Yeah.
So you are one of the, as I said, the co-founders and the director for Company of Crime.
Yes.
Where is Resistance Games located?
We're located almost at the Arctic Circle, so quite far in the northern Finland, in a city called Oulu. Okay. So like a old tar city back in the 1600s the city was established, and it's only like 1.5 hours, 2 hours away from the Arctic Circle by car. So
wow, that sounds really cold. That's
it's not so much. Like if one takes the same latitude in Canada, it's a lot colder thanks to the in Canada thanks to the Gulf Stream that heats us up. So it's actually I love the weather in Oulu because we have literally we have 4 seasons. The spring and autumn and winter and summer are more than just names. They are very, very different between one another. So.
That's fantastic. I live in the southeast of the United States, and we have summer with brown leaves, cold summer, and then summer with pollen everywhere. So it's not so great. So that's
I mean, you should Google some pictures of the same place in Finland, and they look like stunningly different depending on the season. And the summers are here really, really warm, so it's not cold all the time, even if there is snow in the winter.
Fantastic. Well, so how long have you guys been around, and how many people do you have at Resistance?
Well, we were established in summer of 2018. Then we had been bootstrapping the company for over a year before that. So kind of all of us were in different companies doing our day jobs and then dreaming of better strategy games and then doing work to get everything started. And then we established Resistance Games when we were close to a deal with 1C Entertainment. And yeah, then we've been working since January 2019 on Company of Crime, like full-time.
Okay.
Of course, some preparations earlier. And we are 13 people at the moment, a relatively large founding team of 8 people. So it was good to share the workload in the bootstrapping phase when there were more than just a couple of founding members. So.
Gotcha.
So that's us. But particularly for a Northern Finnish team, I do dare say that we're quite experienced. The founding team has on average 15 years of experience. So I have 1 year less than the average team member on experience. But now that we have grown, then the average experience has dropped to 13 years. So
okay, very cool. Where were you at before you founded Resistance?
Well, as we were bootstrapping, I did actually consulting. So I calculated that in 2018 I got salaries from 9 different organizations. Oh, wow. Of course, those were more or less my clients, Koko Games or Plion Games or Business Oulu or some other like Little Chicken. I did a bit like short tour. But before that, seriously, earlier I was in Reborn Games and then Vima Games, and Oulu Game Lab is one of the things I'm most proud of. It's a kind of a game initiative that works here that combines education to incubation, like business incubation, and has created lots of new companies to the region. So
very cool.
Did that for a few years as well.
Very cool. Glad to hear. So this is, I guess, a little more time-sensitive question compared to, I guess, when the world is acting normally. But how are you guys as far as the whole coronavirus situation going? Everybody healthy? What are you guys doing as far as everybody working from home, or how does all that work out?
Yeah. Actually, we were lucky enough that we actually started working from home like half a week before it was recommended. So we're now more than 4 weeks working from home. It's worked a lot better than I expected. Me personally, I mostly have bad experiences of distance work. It doesn't work as well as face-to-face, but we have gone to great extent to make sure that the communications would stay as good as it has been in the when we're in the same office. So far it's worked better than I thought it would. And I would say the productivity hasn't dropped, well, maybe a tiny bit, but not much really. So
awesome.
Worked so far great. It helps, of course, with Company of Crime, it's so far already in development that if it was like pre-production or early production, then we probably would have suffered more.
Sure, I could see that being a lot more difficult. But glad you guys are doing okay. That is good to hear. So we will move on from the that topic and get into the game. I guess for anybody that hasn't looked at the preview of this yet or hasn't checked out the game elsewhere, what's kind of the high level explanation of the game? What is Company of Crime?
Well, if I first say the fluff and then go to concrete level, it's a PC strategy game about criminal London in the 1960s. So we follow in the footsteps of the Kray Brothers and Richardsons and others. On a more concrete level, it's a turn-based tactical strategy game, very much like XCOM, but our key difference is that it takes place in the heart of a large city. So you don't go killing people all the time. So it's a lot more melee based. So we have gone to great extent to have the tactical choices and the depth of the tactical missions that XCOM has, and make sure that we are as deep when we focus on melee primarily, and then change the gameplay quite a bit to accommodate that. So basically, it's divided to two parts, but like in strategy map, you handle your criminal activities and then you play out the crime in tactical missions. So
very cool. So why 1960s London? What drew you to that place and time to set the game?
I think it's like there is plenty of reasons. One, of course, is that maybe together with San Francisco, the 1960s London was the culture capital of the world. It was the home for Beatles, like all sorts of youth culture forms, from mods to rockers to Lemonheads, Yardies, pirate radios. It's an era that even you don't have to be a history freak that you recognize the era and London's role in it, but it's also an era and place where you can go really, really deep, and you find lots of amazing stuff there. So really, really interesting stuff. And of course, like the Tom Hardy recently showed, or a couple of years showed, that or popularized rather, that it was also the worst time of police corruption in the London police, and there were criminal families that had even politicians in their pockets. And as an era, it's so intriguing that that was the whole starting point, trying to figure out what game mechanics would fit this era and this city.
Okay, very cool. Now, from just looking at the game and some of the stuff that we've talked about, obviously there's the rise of kind of your criminal empire that you're starting as. But is there? It sounds like there's more to the story with the Cold War going on. There's some sort of mysterious order happening. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, what the bigger story could ultimately lead to?
Yeah. I'm glad that you asked. Now, if someone doesn't want to spoil the story too much, I'm not going to reveal everything. But after the initial stage of indeed following in the footsteps of the Kray Brothers and introducing the other criminal families as well, which there is 5 other criminal families, we will meet with the third faction. If there is like the police and the criminals, then there is indeed a secret order, like kind of like Spectre in James Bond films, and that wants to destroy the British Empire, which still was in place to some extent. They still had some colonies left in the 1960s. They hadn't yet joined the European Union, and the order wants to end Great Britain as it was in the early 1960s. And then this allows us to also build a heroic ending for the criminal side as well, when they are meeting with the order. But we don't go too serious on the order bit. It's more like our tool to tie the era together. Also, that there is all sorts of other cool stuff also happening that we can't deal so well with the chosen game mechanics. But we want to kind of pinpoint that this was a cool and interesting time in history.
Sure. So now you mentioned that you've got the 2 main factions, police and mafia. Then we'll eventually get to see a third secret one. That's honestly, I don't know why that gets a little bit of a chuckle out of me, but the idea of you can be the hero of the story, being the mob. I guess that kind of goes back into what you were talking about with during the demo, is that you're kind of a gentleman gangster. You're not just going around killing people. You're roughing people up and getting money from them and whatever. But you're not a homicidal maniac, which is good. We need more not homicidal maniacs in video games.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also just following in the footsteps of the Krays, because when the Kray brothers that were quite famous back in the days, they were in the newspapers and so forth, so people knew who they were and still know who they were. We did a pilgrimage to the one of the key locations, and there were like everyone. Like I literally met two young women who were fans of the Krays, and that was like the weirdest thing that took place like a half a year ago, as I was visiting London. So they were convicted of only 3 murders, the brothers in any case, and max 6 others that the historians have said that probably the Krays murdered 6 more people. And even in the court case, they said that, well, they never harmed anyone who didn't deserve it. So in this sense, also for the Krays, the other criminals, other gangsters, and other people living at the fringes of law or on the other side of law, they were who they were hard on. So that's why they kind of were still respected by the civilian populace, even though, like in a modern world, idolizing criminals, that's not a very cool thing to do. But they had their morals in any case, that they felt and defended that they never harmed anyone who didn't deserve it. So any civilians never suffered any ill fate from their hands, according to them, of course. Of course, them, right. The courts disagreed.
Well, so you have the mob side of things where you're doing all that, but you can also play as the police. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between, I guess, story-wise, kind of, I guess, your overall goals, and then we'll get into gameplay after that. But how those differ between being the police or being the mafia.
Yeah, I think like story-wise or identification-wise, it's easier for police side. Like, yeah, catch the criminals. That's already heroic in a sense, or not in a sense. It is a heroic thing. So for the gameplay, I think there is a big differences in gameplay. That in if you're playing the mobsters or gangsters, how you progress, how you become more powerful, is basically by acquiring illegal covers for your criminal operations. So you're trying to take over different businesses and then get income and influence out of those, and they are how you unlock new stuff in the criminal side. But when you're playing the police side, you play with lack of information. When in criminal side progression, if you expand in the game, a new district or borough is unlocked, you already see what's in there, who does what, and so forth. But on the police side, you don't have that information. So you have to use your sergeant and your own units to find informants, to try to find suspicious locations. And if you find, you don't know if it's a civilian owned, and are they just victims of the criminal families, that they are paying protection money for the criminals, or is this business owned by the criminal family? So you have to figure all this out, and then of course rate the places that you find out that are owned by the criminals, and like if you end up there stopping an extortion mission, then try to arrest the criminals that are beating up the shop owners.
Very cool.
So more reactive police in this sense, and like you have to work your way to be proactive. But then whenever criminals are doing something, then you react to those. But your own proactive actions are more limited.
Gotcha. That makes sense. You don't want to just go around arresting people that don't need to or deserve to be arrested.
Yeah.
Unlike real life. Anyway, moving on. So getting more into the gameplay, I guess as you mentioned a little bit ago, it's kind of divided up into 2 sides. You've got the on the ground kind of XCOM like combat where you're moving around in grids, and you've have action points and all that kind of stuff, and then you have the wider strategic thing, whereas the mob, you're taking over businesses and you're, as the police, you're investigating stuff. I guess if you could talk a little bit about the actual on the boots gameplay, and then a little bit more about the wider systemic gameplay.
Yeah, sure. So in the tactical missions, if you have played XCOM, you'll fit right in. The main differences are that the flanking works totally different than in XCOM. As hopefully most of your reader or viewers, hearers, how do you call podcaster? Listeners. Yes, that's the word. Yeah, listeners. Hopefully most know that in XCOM the main thing is that you try to run from cover to cover and make sure that your enemy isn't in cover, so you flank them so that there isn't anything blocking your way. Whereas in Company of Crime, how the flanking in melee works is that if you attack from behind, so any of the 3 tiles behind the unit, then you are flanking that. So where is your unit orientated? Where does the unit look into? That plays a big role. So you want to basically choose that every time. And the other big difference is that all the units, except civilians, have zone of control. And zone of control basically means that if you and I, we're fighting, so we are facing one another, and if I try to then walk away, you get a free attack, and if the attack is successful, then that action is cancelled, so I didn't succeed getting away. So that plays a big role. Basically, it means that we can create interesting choke point and have different unit classes that behave differently, particularly when the levels are a lot tighter. There is less space than in XCOM's levels. So let's say that we are in a pub and I have a bouncer unit, which is more like the muscular tank type of unit. So that one unit could help blockade 3 tiles with its zone of control. And if I tell my unit to brace for it, basically spend 1 action point to raise the hand for a defensive stance, then he might be able to hold it off while my other units try to flank or go do perform the actual action or whatever is the mission. Then of course the torturer is really good at allowing movements for my units, because if torture comes, let's say you're a torturer now, we are fighting, and you have the ability to poke your fingers into my eyes, that's a nasty move, but that will basically temporarily take away my zone of control. So your friends could then freely flank me. They wouldn't have to go long way to do that. Of course, there is like all sorts of nasty kicks, like nut kicks or throwing people over the table or whatnot, as well as since we have choke points or kind of zone of control, we want the levels to feel as tactical as possible. So the lighter chairs, beer glasses, ashtrays, they can be used as one-time use weapons as well. So you can hit people with the chair or ashtray or bottle or glass and so forth, and that they will take some damage out of that as well. And third large difference, which ties deeply into this gangster gameplay, is that when you're hitting someone with a fist or a baseball bat or a cricket bat, you are causing mostly stamina damage. So units have stamina, and if stamina goes to 0, they are knocked out. They're not dead. If you then keep on kicking them and the stamina goes to -10, then they die. But if you take out a pistol or a shotgun, those do also stamina damage, but the primary thing is that they cause health damage. And if health drops to 0, then the unit dies. So the weapons are, in a way, more lethal than in XCOM, which is strange to say because in XCOM you always kill everyone. That's the whole point. But we want the weapons to feel that yes, if I grab this, even the like high level units need to be afraid that they have more health. They are harder to kill, but definitely easier to kill than like high level unit in XCOM meeting with the like a low level first level unit of the enemy. And that for us the shotguns and others balance out the level difference quite a bit, which leads to the fact that even though you don't necessarily want to pick up the gun yourself, that's also what we are aiming to do, that the different criminal families would feel different, that some of them will pick up guns faster. If they are losing, then some of them will go berserk and start shooting, whereas others are more gentlemen and then they don't pick up weapons, but rather flee more easily, or indeed they just keep on fighting till the bitter end or whatnot.
Gotcha. Is that I know the game's still in development, and so not everything is nailed down, obviously, but is that a setting that like this particular faction or family always does this, or is just more likely to act this way, or how does that kind of actually play out in a mission?
Yeah, it's like, of course, the AI behavior is one of the main things that we're still balancing. And we don't want any families to always do it, but they are more probable. Some families are more probable to do it. And some families will never do it. But it's not predetermined that they would always do it. They are basically like they have different things that they favor. So we basically balance out how much they favor certain stuff in certain situations. So it's a lot of math, balancing a math behind there. So
gotcha. One of my other weaknesses, besides obviously understanding the other side of games, math. I don't like it, so I'm glad somebody does it. Kudos to whoever's doing all the math.
Yeah. So a good thing in making like turn-based game is that the math itself is quite, or it should be so easy to grasp that it makes sense when player sees it. That if it's well, of course, AI behavior math, that should feel personal. That shouldn't feel like math. That should feel like, oh shit, that AI made a clever decision, or a person like a very charismatic decision. So that shouldn't feel like math. But most of the kind of mechanics we could paper prototype them if needed. So
gotcha. Now, from the way that you described guns, they're super powerful. It sounds like it would be a good idea to always use them, except for the fact that there's the heat system. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Sorry, I forgot the main thing. One of the main differences between us and other tactical games is that indeed police is all over you. Like in both the tactical side and as well as in the strategic map, there is heat, and they work pretty differently between one another. So in tactical missions, the more violent you are, the more loud you are, the more heat you will accumulate. So if you beat someone with a baseball bat, then that will create definitely some heat. And if heat is accumulated enough, then someone calls the police. But if you start shooting people, that will create a lot more heat. And the police, they are similar units as yours, but if you fight a police, that will definitely increase heat, or even if you just punch them and don't kill them, let alone if you kill them, then that will increase heat quite a lot, and even more police will come. So the wisest thing to do if police is called is to bugger off. That finish whatever you came for, don't stay to fight, flee the scene, don't be seen, because whatever evidence you left behind, and if there is body count in the level, your heat in the strategic layer will also increase, and that will influence the police AI. How eagerly will they attack your or try to arrest your units as they are living their lives in the city? They might be just visiting a barber shop, and then the police comes to arrest them, and you just have to flee, like you have a tactical mission where you try to avoid arrest. And the police might arrest your those legal covers of yours. So they might raid a place, and if you don't manage to burn the evidence, like the accounting, or if it's a vet, if you don't burn the drugs, then you will lose that place. So it also makes sense to be a gentleman gangster and not a violent murderer. So
always good to have incentives to not be a murderous fiend. It's
yeah, like in real life.
Like in real life.
Yeah.
So obviously, weapons are more of kind of it seems like a last resort sort of thing. You don't want to go into a place just shooting things up, as we saw in the demo that ended with like half of your crew getting arrested. It was not a good time for you. For
indeed,
them.
Indeed.
It was
yeah, indeed. And of course, there is like, we do want to use weapons rarely to create like the most epic twists to a level, or indeed if there is a story-driven mission, then sometimes you might end up using weapons in any case, but they are more of an exception when it's wise to use. And also one thing I forgot to mention during the demoing also is that the locations matter also, how much heat is accumulated. If you are in industrial area, like a warehouse type of locations, there aren't so many civilians around, so the heat will rise slower. So there, performing some murderous acts doesn't come as quick penalty as it would be if you started murdering people in a pub. So,
gotcha. Are there going to be places on the map where otherwise there's just a higher police presence in that area that would cause the heat to rise faster? Or how I don't know, I guess kind of a larger scale version of what you're talking about with the warehouse.
Yeah, well, to some extent, yes. We do have like ways to control for individual location, like location type level, that how does the heat rise. If it was like in this district, you should not use. We don't have a way to communicate that, and we don't want to communicate that with the text only. So it's more tied to the location type rather than this part of the city. So it's, if there is like the locations themselves, they are, of course, we've tried to follow London, that industrial areas would be where they were in the 1960s, but we have taken creative liberties. So Savile Road is where Savile Road is, and there is lots of tailors there, but it's also some locations are in the wrong place for gameplay reasons as well. So
sure.
So it's tied more to the locations than in the part of the map, so to speak. If you're playing the criminal side, particularly as we are the gentlemen criminals or gangsters, what you need to do is having the civilians both fear and respect you. So both of these are kind of district by district, how much the people living there fear you or how much they respect you. And you want to both of them to be quite high, because they will unlock different things you can do. And without respect being high, you can't build those legal covers. So as you're expanding your turf, expanding the new parts of the city, you will first want to not just have like a merciless reputation or a fear, like a horrible reputation, infamy, but also respect. so that you can actually operate there. So if you're being a total dick, then you just can't. The civilians basically then trust the police too much that they don't accept your coercing ownership of their place, that they're making a deal they can't refuse. They will rather go to the police, and you can't basically perform that action. So those are kind of two things per district that you want to pay attention, that how high is the fear and how high is the respect.
Gotcha. So I guess one thing that I'm wondering is, when you're playing from the gangster side, you are an up and coming new game. You actually play as a pair of siblings. Does that gang exist if you're playing from the police side? Is there a gang that's basically trying to take over all of the districts of London and replace all of the other gangs, like you would be trying to do if you were playing that side?
Yeah, good. You have good questions. We actually make a kind of funny reference to that. In Criminal, when you play, the first thing you do when you start the criminal campaign is that you steal a jewelry store, so you have your starting cash and learn the ropes of the game, how everything works. In the police tutorial mission, similarly, you are in the same place and you basically arrest those two siblings, so their criminal career never takes off. You're playing the criminal side, so
that's pretty funny. I like
that.
That's the kind of attention to detail I can get behind.
Yeah.
So as you play the game from the criminal side, your heat can rise systemically. As we were talking about, is there any way to reduce that?
Yes, those legal covers, the businesses you own, they will every month drop your heat a bit. So there is a extra reason to get certain types of locations that you might want to prioritize those so that you get your heat down. But then there is also some assignments. Everything you do basically in the map, we call them assignments. They might lead to tactical missions, but not always. So particularly the French lesson places, which are which was the term for prostitution in the 1960s. So the prostitution was in hiding. There weren't bordellos, but there were lots of prostitution still. So having control of those will allow you to try to get some dirt, so to speak, or leverage on politicians, which will then lower the heat. Like you can perform, if you own a specific locations, you can try to get your heat down by basically having people in powerful places telling the police to back off. So that's actually the French lessons, the coolest part why you would want to have French lesson places in your criminal empire. Okay. Which are also like as a tactical, like all the locations, all the businesses, they are handcrafted levels. So you can do the tactical missions in them. And I think the French lessons are in a way coolest places because it might be just an office if it was a call girl kind of a place where you called and then you got a prostitute for a visit. Or it might be indeed the walk-in, which London still has, which the law was it so that the bordellos are forbidden, but if there is only one prostitute working, that's not a bordello yet. So there were lots of walk-ins there. So the difference is how the French lesson locations, what the final levels are, if you are doing missions there, they look the most different. Like I guess pub is a pub no matter what the layout is. There are cooler pubs and less cool pubs, but the French lesson places are very, very different. Some might be a back room at the laundry place or or indeed something that looks like an office where just calls were connected and so forth.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think we've covered pretty much. I mean, we haven't covered everything because we've talked about a lot more, but there'll be a lot more info in the preview of the game. But I think that does it for the questions I had for the game itself. Now we get to move on to the part of the game that I call the end game, and it's really just fun personal questions for you. And the first one's very simple, but it can be very difficult, and that's who's your favorite video game character? This can be a faction for a strategy game. It can be the hero of a game. It can be a sidekick, a villain, any number of things. But what's your favorite character in a game?
That's a very, very good question. I think I will have to go as far back as Baldur's Gate 2. And was it Viconia, the drow elf, the dark elf character, with whom the player character can have, and I of course had a romantic interest and like deep connection when in the drow society men are slaves, and then she of course behaved like men are slaves, and that was so well written that I almost quit the game when the story led it so that she would have to go back to the drow. I hope I remember the term, was it drow? But in any case, to the dark elf society, and I could no longer have her in my team. And I was like, but I don't want to continue this game now. So, that would have to be the favorite one. So
that's awesome. I'm currently reading some R.A. Salvatore books about Drizzt Stewart, who's a drow, and learning all about that kind of stuff. I haven't read any of those books in a long time, and it's great fun. It's great fun.
Yeah,
Dark elves are the best.
Indeed.
So if you could replay any video game for the first time and have that kind of first experience again, what would you don't have to worry about it aging poorly or anything like that, but what would you like that replayed game to be?
That's also, would I then have the same experience? Like if it's an old game, then it obviously some things would have become obsolete design-wise. Can I choose one of those?
Sure, yeah.
Then it would have to be a King of Dragon Pass, an indie game by A-Sharp from 1999. I was totally mind-blown by that. In King of Dragon Pass, you basically manage like fantasy, but the kind of medieval village. And you have to learn how to think medieval to be good in that game. And that was so mind-blowing experience that that was the game when I knew I wanted to make games. Before that, I loved playing games. I've played games since I was 5 years old, but like video games. But since then, I knew that I will want to have a chance to work on games myself. So it would have to be that one.
That's fantastic. I feel like I don't get to hear about games that I haven't actually either heard about or played, and that one is new to me.
It's actually, if I may share two interesting stories regarding that. In my country, Finland, there is or was like a very dominant games magazine. Nowadays there is several magazines, but back then there was just one fully focused on games. And they made this article, which I also read, because back in the 1990s, everyone read that. So they gave it 96 points, huge praises, and that was still when people bought boxes, and in other countries you had to buy the shelf space. So the game actually didn't sell well, so it's not very well-known game. But in Finland, it rose to be a top 10 seller because of Games Magazine's article. And David Dunham, the creator of the game, has several times mentioned that holy shit, that was so weird that in the 1990s we were top 10 seller in Finland and didn't sell almost any copies anywhere else. And that was because of the power of Pelit magazine. And the other part is that if there are heroes for me in game industry, it is David Dunham. And I 2 years ago, he was invited into a game conference here in Finland, and I got to go to sauna with him. So that was really, really cool. Of course, all the speakers. I was speaker there as well. So we had the kind of speakers evening at the cottage. So that was like a cool time to finally meet my own hero, and then spend an evening with a bunch of game developers talking about games we love.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really awesome. Okay, so sort of the sort of the flip side of that. What is a blind spot in video games that you have, whether a particular game or a franchise or maybe even a genre that you haven't played, and whether or not you actually feel like you need to, I guess society or other people constantly tell you that you need to have played that game or franchise or genre or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, how many do I dare to? Like, your listeners are gonna hate me if I reveal all the blind spots. Like I'll do couple of blind spots. Hopefully, the listeners are merciful for me. I grew up with Commodore 64 and Amiga, so I've always been a kind of computer gamer. Mm-hmm. So the first console that I owned is Xbox One, and I still don't play ever on it. So I pretty much any console game I have blind spots on it. Heavy Rain I have played, that was awesome. I don't know if that's on PC nowadays, but that was so awesome that I had to go to my sister's place and play it, and it was awesome. But even if I look at the PC side, I have so much blind spots. I think the one that I keep hearing most often is Dark Souls. It has so horrible keyboard and mouse controls that I have Xbox, so I should try it with the gamepad. But I played it for an hour and couldn't deal with the controls, and then felt like I should play it with the gamepad, and never got back to it. But I, like, me as a designer, I hear that that's merciless. It it punishes people, and somehow people still love it. So I also know that I would, as a designer, would have to play. How can you punish your player and still have awesome experience? I know hard is fun kind of philosophy, but you still need micro rewards. You still need kind of reward systems, and I would need to see how does that work. How does it do the difficulties fun part? Because everyone praises Dark Souls.
Sure. Yeah, I recently picked up Dark Souls 2 because it was on sale, and I got it on PC, and I realized that the game doesn't even have you can use a mouse and keyboard with it, but it uses no UI to denote the cursor or the characters of the keyboard. You have to actually install a mod to see normal keys on the game.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, and that's why I understand it's an intentionally difficult game, but that made it even more difficult to learn when you couldn't see like you only saw the gamepad controls what to do, and so
it's kind of crazy. Okay, so what is a good trend in video games that you would like to see more of? Something positive, whether it's a gameplay element or something that a particular studio is doing. It can be kind of a meta textual, it can be outside of the actual game itself, but what's something positive in video games that you would just like to see more of?
Well, I think I have a knack for history. I studied history as my major back in the days, like almost 20 years ago. So I miss the time when games experimented with new genres. Of course, in the indie games they experiment a lot, and I love that side. I really love that. Like, I'm not saying that we are doing that. Like, we aren't doing as much experimenting as some do, but games like Stanley Parable or even Depression Quest, which was attacked a few years ago. I'm super happy that those games exist. That games explore new themes, new mechanics. They are about new stuff. I hope that there would be more games about like love, like social feelings, not the porn type, but indeed, like love touches us all, and I still haven't, like, the closest to experiencing love in video games is either to some extent, I guess, for me, that is in the Walking Dead for that little girl, or indeed that Baldur's Gate 2 story that I already shared. But like, why is there not more exploration on the emotions that are more difficult to trigger, like the kind of survival emotions, scaredness or fear and others? They are easier to trigger because our brains are wired that way. But why games don't explore more of that? And that's a trend I would love to see more. And there are in the kind of indie scene games, but if it's indie scene, like from 1 to 5 people, then of course it's very limited what you can do with a team size like that. So hopefully there would be bigger games also exploring other emotions than just survival emotions.
Absolutely, yeah. And one thing that always frustrates me is when, especially in a video game that has like romance options, it seems like the relationship essentially stops. It culminates at sex, whether or not the game shows it. Like, you talk to somebody and the reward is sex, and now the relationship cannot progress any further. You don't get to talk to the person anymore. There's no real new dialogue with them. It's done.
And that's the thing, that like indeed Mass Effects and others, it feels to me that like, if the story is good, you get association to that, but you don't have game mechanics related to that. You don't like have, like, let's say, Darkest Dungeon that makes the stress mechanics. That's brilliant. That's like being scared is one of the mechanics. So why not having social, like, even if it's friendship, like if I bring my friend with me to a mission, I get some boost. So like like game would praise, hey, you took care of your friend, instead of just focusing the mechanics somewhere else and then having the story trying to deliver that. Of course, in AAA games you can get away with story delivering emotional stuff, but that still means that your main mechanics don't deal with that, which I originally intended. That they're usually like survival games, the mechanics, basically what you do is how you survive. It all, what you basically do is all related to that. But in most games that do deal with some sort of emotions, it's dialogue options mostly. What is your game mechanics? Why isn't there other mechanics that at play, that other decisions to do than just dialogue options?
I don't know.
Yeah, me neither. But I hope that like, there are in the smaller like indie scene, there are games that explore new stuff. But this is something I would want to see a bit more, even though, like, I'm a hardcore strategy gamer and Resistance Games is a strategy game studio. So, but as a gamer, I would want to see this a lot more.
Sure. All right. So kind of the flip side of the good trend, is there any tropes or anything bad in video games that you would like to see less of, or possibly just go away entirely? Again, this can be a mechanic. This can be something some studio's doing. It can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, well, I like I hope that the online communities wouldn't be so toxic, that people would deal with one another with respect. That's big reason why most of my multiplayer sessions, they are just with friends. I don't want to go online to play with random people. Mostly, like I do like Dead by Daylight because that's a cooperative game, and there is very limited community. There is a chat, but usually it's actually quite positive stuff in any case, at least what I've seen. So like that aggressive behavior, like if you have a small penis, why do you have to wave it to everyone to prove it? Or like I don't know, like that's pretty much. But I love games, and I think most like vast majority of gamers are awesome. I feel at home whenever I meet fellow gamers, fellow game developers. So I think like we are definitely on the positive side as a kind of community, but that side is something I don't like.
Right. Well, if all the polite people are being quiet, then the rude people, their loudness just becomes louder. So I totally understand that.
In Finland, we have an idiom or a saying, which translates like that there is plenty of space for sound in the world. So basically meaning that even if someone is being obnoxious, we shouldn't pay attention to them or let them spoil our day. The same going as well, that like just because someone like someone is making a game that's not targeted to me, it doesn't mean that the game would be bad. Like just had a good discussion with fellow game developers that one of the most famous Finnish game developers, the City Skylines creator, is now making kind of erotic choose your own story type of games for women. She's a women developer in any case. I'm not a target audience, but I'm super happy that there are games like that, and I wish her all the success. So
absolutely, that's really cool. I hadn't heard about that. That's really neat.
Yeah, I think Sixth Muse or something like that is what she's nowadays making, if I remember the company name right.
Awesome. Okay, now to our penultimate question. If there's any other profession that you would like to try, and this is not any bad assumption about not having to or not being able to make video games anymore, but this is just literally you could try whatever you wanted to, whether it's an astronaut or an international food taster or whatever the case could be. What's something that you would like to give a shot?
I'll answer two, because I do intend to follow those at some point, and in a sense I have followed somewhat. I would love to be a history teacher as well, or history researcher. I have 11-hour lecture series on history of games, covering games from the Stone Age to Space Age to year 2000. It's in Udemy. So I've always loved history almost as much as games. But in a way, it's more important because that's history also relates to how I see the world. That if I would only know present, then how do I know is the world or my life or anything going to the better or to the worse? But if I know history, how things were and how they are now, then I know the direction where we are headed. So it's no longer just a position in time and space. The other profession is politics. I have a couple of times ran to like municipal office, did quite well, but now in the last years I haven't had any time for it. But I want to run for municipal office in the next election, at least, to make sure that my home city would be as great as it can be. So awesome. Those two.
Fantastic. All right, and on the incredibly admirable answers that you just gave there, I'm going to ask you another very silly question. you get to meet Viconia DeVere somehow, and you get to ask her one question. What is the question that you would ask her, and what is her response?
Viconia, yeah. It's so long ago that I played that. I guess it would be, would you choose me over the child of Baal, whoever that main character was? That she was so awesome in that game. So I guess that would be the question. But since she wouldn't know me, so the answer would be no, I guess. So.
Fantastic. All right, well that does it. Thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting, for showing me the game and then talking with me about it afterwards. Wish you guys the best of luck as you finish up development and get the game out. If you could let people know where the game is coming out, when they can find out some more information about it, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, it should come out in summer, towards the end of summer. The final date is not yet decided, so even I don't know it, or we have some dates that we have circled, or One-C has circled around, and but it hasn't been locked as far as I know, so, or at least it's not public knowledge yet. So, but yeah, summer in Steam, in 8 different languages, I think. So quite a lot of localization work has been done, and still a tiny bit left, but not much. Yeah, and the price point, I think, is also still not yet decided.
All right. Fantastic. Well, again, best of luck for you guys as you finish up development, and look forward to hearing more from your studio in the future.
Yeah, and you should definitely wishlist the game so you get all the news and the price point, the final launch date, and of course additional information, even though I'm pretty sure we covered quite a lot already today. But
sounds great. All right. Well, that does it. And yeah, we'll be back with more interview video gamey stuff and soon. And next episode, whatever that is.